Hello, everybody. This is Sean and Archie Miller on the Next Play podcast, and we welcome our special guest. I invited him about 3 or 4 days ago, and he's kind enough to join us. Trust me, he has a busy schedule at this time of year, so we're elated to have you on, and we want to welcome Ken Pomeroy. Ken, welcome.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Really been looking forward to this and chatting with you guys. I watch your stuff after hours, so looking forward to a good conversation here.
Well, I tell you, I wanted to just historically just kind of bring to life kind of how you and I got together a little bit. And then, my first question, once we kind of cross that, is just, I would love, just to hear you kind of explain, your rise into where you once were to what you're doing today, just for our audience, because I think when you say KenPom in college basketball, and this is a real credit to you, it's synonymous. It's like everybody kind of knows right now. It's the analytics that we look at, that I think whether it's fans, coaches, we've all become accustomed to looking at your site and listening to you and watching those numbers become reality. So before we get to that, when I was at Xavier, I think around that time, that's when your site was just really, I think, becoming more and bigger and popular. I went on it, and Ken, I'm telling you, Arch is my witness. There's no coach that coached college basketball that believed in it and looked at it more than me. I mean, to the point where my wife actually had a problem with me, like in the middle of the night, she would catch me, have my phone and go looking at it. And the reason why it meant so much to me as a coach, and Arch, I'll let you jump in here, is it wasn't just, looking at my team, but, you can look at your site and you could look at your current team, what you're doing well, what you're not doing well. You can compare that to previous teams you've had, which I think is really powerful. Sometimes in the emotion of coaching, you almost don't recognize or realize what you're doing well, or sometimes not as well. And I used your site to always kind of ground me with facts. And then the second thing is, through scouting, the team you're getting ready to play, you had a great barometer on what they are doing well, but they're not doing well. And it was a metric in your site we really relied a lot on to help us be the best we could be to prepare our team in scouting, that team we were playing. Furthermore, like the third part about it is, you can start looking at individual players and look at what your own players have done from one year to the next, what teams you're getting ready to play. Like if you click on a player of a team you're getting ready to play, one of the things I always drill down on is what they shoot from 2 and what they shoot from 3. Because if you just looked at the old stat sheet, it could lead you down the wrong path. Some of these guys are prolific inside the arc, don't take a lot of threes, but make them. And sometimes it's vice versa. But how you split that, to me, is, again, something that we tried to really talk to our players a lot. Hey, 70% of this guy's shots come from beyond the arc. It's important that you understand that in scouting. So those are just 3 or 4 off the top of my head. When I tell you I was consumed with your site, we utilized it as a tool, and I believe in it. And if I were picking the NCAA tournament, and I know that's now a metric everyone uses, or a site everyone uses, I don't think there's anything better than what you do.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, a lot of what you're discussing is why I developed a site. Is, I was watching games on TV and hearing people talk about who was playing, commentators or whatever, but even coaches, coaches do interviews, and sometimes they tell you, what they want you to hear and things like that. And so, I just wanted a way to get the facts for every team. I can only follow so many teams. So, when a game I cared about was coming on and I didn't know one of the teams, I could have a quick reference. And yeah, so I appreciate you saying that. I obviously you were one of the early adopters, and the reason my site grew was because of people like you, dropping my name at press conferences, in front of media groups that a lot of times might be, skew a little older and maybe weren't that into, jumping into new stats and stuff like that. And when those people heard you mention my name, then they had to like take an interest in it and figure out what was going on. So it was, so I, really appreciate all the support you've given me over the years. It's been a big help.
Well, it's easy to do. I mean, I hope it's helped you because the only reason I did it is I truly believed what I was saying. But I know Arch feels the same way.
Yeah, we as early as the early 2000s, Ken, as crazy as it sounds, really before it was mainstream lingo to everyone. When I was at NC State with Herb Sendek, at the time, Herb had morphed his offense into more of a Princeton style stuff. And it was much more about like, not as much how many points a game you score, having a great offense. It was tempo, how fast you play, how many threes are you shooting, what's your effective field goal percentage. And like, there was a guy named Greg Moreland at the time on our staff, very, very intelligent guy, really studied the game. And he would always say in our staff meetings, Herb, I don't know why you're all bent out of shape about our offense. We have the number 4 ranked offense in college basketball right now. And he would look at him and say, Greg, I don't know what the hell you're talking about right now. Where do you get those numbers? He was on it like way back. Yeah. And you can kind of go back even as early as you started. I think it's 02. And you start to track 02, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And those are the times when really no one was talking about efficiencies. They were saying, how fast do you play? How many points a game do you score? What do you shoot from 3? But there's much more to it now. And then, as a head coach, especially when I started at Dayton and we were growing, you would become just consumed with the improvement or lack thereof. And the year we went to the Elite Eight, which was 2014, we had a good team, but we hit a stretch in January where we lost 4 in a row. And in the Atlantic 10 at that time was a very good league. 6 teams went to the tournament, but we were plummeting in the numbers. And I just remember saying, if I keep looking at this stuff, like I'm going to literally fall off the edge. And I quit looking at your site for the rest of the season. And we went on this miraculous, great run. Our team, picked it up. And as I started to look in the NCAA tournament, as we started to advance at our numbers, it was crazy to see the difference in a month, how far you can climb. And just depending on like, you can really improve at certain times of the year, and you can watch teams, grow and hit runs, specifically from a numbers standpoint. Defensively, that team went from like low 90s or whatever, and it climbed as the season went. But it's a great site. And as Sean mentioned, helps you prepare your team, your players. It also, really helps you talk to your own players. I think as you study your own players through the course of a season or year to year, you can really develop a way of trying to help them improve, with their efficiency. Where are they at? Assist to turnover, free throw rate, free throw percentage, things like that. I think really help a coach, not just your team or preparing, but just looking at your own players and how they grow over the years is really, really interesting as well in terms of their ratings. And I think just from my standpoint, as you look at really good players across college basketball, if you search the leagues on your site and you go to your KenPom top 5 players in each conference, it's really telling who the best players are and what they're doing in league play. I think that's a very underrated gauge of who's really good in league play. If you look at sometimes you'll have 4 guys from one team, 4 out of 5 from one team, and that team is so dominant, but you can tell sort of their numbers and what they're doing in conference play. But
Ken, let me ask you, for those who don't know your background, how this whole thing started.
Yeah, it started out as a hobby. I've always been into the stats and numbers, and would rather punch numbers into a spreadsheet than read a book. So that's kind of been just how my brain operates. And 20 years ago or so, book Moneyball came out. There's a lot of work in analytics in baseball, and there was really not much going on in basketball. What little there was for the NBA. And so I just kind of wanted to do some stuff for college basketball. And as I mentioned, I was watching games and people were, just like Archie was saying, talking about like teams' offenses and defense in terms of points per game. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me. And so it started as a hobby, made the website. And, at the time I was a meteorologist working for the government, and, really enjoyed my job. Never had any goal or thought of doing this full time or anything like that. But, things kind of took off over time, just gradually more and more people people started using it, more coaches started using it, more media started mentioning it, and became popular enough where I could do it full time. And, that's what I've been doing now for the last 9 years, I guess.
How were you at predicting the weather?
Well, I'll just say this, like predicting the weather gave me a good appreciation for, having some humility in predictions. Right. And like that happens in basketball too. And we're just talking about the Arizona UCLA series, it's like, it's you can't predict things with absolute certainty. That's why we watch the games. That's why it's so popular. And so it really gave me a good grounding for like, hey, if I'm gonna put predictions on my website, I need to put like a percentage by these predictions, because there's obviously not absolute certainty in making any of these forecasts.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the correct me if I'm wrong, I'll call it a metric, okay, that you look at is something that you put and we've talked about this, free throw defense. Right. So I'm going to explain it. And if I'm wrong, you correct me. You play these games. Let's say I'm the coach at Arizona and we play a 35 game season. You look back and you say, what did the other team shoot for percentage from the free throw line against your team? And then I think the other part is relative to the normal percentage that they shoot, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I just have free throw percentage on there, but obviously it's, it should be judged in terms of what your opponent shoot. Yeah, normally.
Okay. Which, for the viewers here, unless there's something else, I know Frank Vogel kind of said something. He defends a free throw like a certain way, like he has his guys go, but like you don't defend the free throw shot. It's called a free throw, right? For a reason. But in the history, or at least over the last decade, Ken, it's a long time. There's a lot of basketball being played over 10 years. The coach whose team has defended the free throw better than any coach. I mean, there's 370 teams over 10 years. The number one coach in that metric of defending the other team's free throw shot is
it Archie Miller? Is that the answer?
It's him.
Yeah. It's like he never practices it. It's like, what's going on
We
there?
we have spent all of our time defending free throws in practice instead of shooting them, because clearly our free throw percentage offense does not equate to number one.
Right. No, that's the thing. His free throw shooting teams weren't like, they were frustrating at times in his recent years. So it's like it evened out because he defended the other team's free throw really well. But I think it's funny. That's true, by the way. We're not even kidding. Like it's amazing that you two are on my screen. It's quite an honor actually to look at that and see it.
Hey, it's one thing. If anyone puts me on a bench anytime soon, it's one thing I will definitely claim that will go well for us as we progress as a program.
So Ken, drilling down here, okay, we have the Providence Friar fans in this season. They're 20-2. They play in a very good conference, the Big East. They're 10-1 in the Big East Conference, right? And they're having historically one of the best seasons that they've had in terms of a regular season. And we both know they're good, but in the Big East Conference, if you just go on your site, I think they're at like 41, right? Maybe the fifth
41.
or sixth best team.
Yeah.
And their fans are beside themselves, basically saying there's no way, there's no way, there's no way. Could you help us explain to them? And by the way, one thing that I'll say is it is February 7th. It's not March 7th. So there's still a lot of basketball to be played, but why is that?
So, my rating is designed to be predictive. That's all I care about is making predictions. I'm not trying to reward you for quality wins or punish you for bad losses or things like that. So when you look historically at what makes good predictions, it's not really who you beat, but how you play against who you play. So for instance, if you look at, just look at historically last 25 years, take a team's record halfway through conference season, take their scoring margin at that point and try to predict the next half of conference season. Wins matter, like wins do help you make that prediction, but scoring margin matters way more. So there is a skill to winning. I don't want to say there's no skill to winning. And actually, historically, when you look at like coaches and what they do late in games and in close games, Ed Cooley has a pretty good track record. I've looked at that. But still, even the best coach in the world doesn't have a lot of control of what happens in close games. And really, if we want to project what's going forward, it's all about scoring margin. And so their scoring margin has not been great. I think if you look at like their scoring margin against top 100 teams, like it's barely positive this year. Like it's because they've had two blowouts and most of their wins have been close. So historically teams like Providence perform like the 41st best team in the country going forward, which is not bad. They could still, they're still going to win a bunch of games, but they're not going to normally teams like that don't win as many games going forward as they have in the past.
And would you say you would look at them because they're definitely in the tournament and they're going to have a great season, regular season, but you have to look at them with some skepticism of how far they can go based on your site?
Yeah, the way I would put it is that if they are going to, go to the Sweet 16 or even get to the Final Four, like they're going to have to play better than they have played so far.
Right.
That's the best way to put it. Like the way, if you look in the past, like teams, again, look, just kind of breaking the conference schedule up in halves, teams that have a lot of success in close games in the first half of the conference season, like their record in the second half of the conference season in close games is like almost 500. Like it's actually below 500, but basically it just gives you an indication that, the idea that teams have like some sort of really special skill in close games, there might be teams that have that, but most teams do not.
Right.
And of course, everybody thinks their team has it. And, if you're coaching that team, of course, you would think your team has that skill and that you have it. And like I said, Ed Cooley historically has some skill in close games, but the notion that they're just going to like constantly win these close games, especially when you get to the tournament, because you're going to play other teams that obviously have played well in close games and have coaches that know what they're doing in close games. And it's like, there's going to be a lot of games that come down to the last possession. And it's kind of fool's gold to think that like your team is going to have some sort of magic potion in those situations.
So the reverse of the question that I just asked you, I think, and I'm curious to get the answer. I would look at Wisconsin when Bo Ryan was the coach and really with Greg as the coach as well, but in particular, Bo Ryan. And as you know, they did not play a fast tempo. They played just the opposite, a slower tempo. Arch knows even better than me, but they would always be incredibly high on your site. I mean, when you look top 5, top 3, it would start where they were near the top and they wouldn't deviate much. And I started to really look at it. And one of the things that I really felt was, look, when they play a team, especially in a non-conference season that they're favored against, in some cases heavily favored against, I mean, they beat them badly. Like the scoring margin at times, you'd see a game 75-42, right? And I want you to know, like I started to adjust the last couple of years because obviously your site is something that's part of the puzzle towards seeding and making the NCAA tournament. That's a fact. It's part of it's not the entire puzzle, but it's part of it. But I believe this, like the days of, you're playing a team and you're up 20 with 4 minutes left and you clear your bench, right? And, some of it is sportsmanship. I still understand that. Some of it is you don't want to get somebody hurt late in the game. But I tell you what, instead of putting them in at 4 minutes, I started putting them in at about 1:40 seconds, simply because there's so many times that in that last 4-minute segment, the game is spun like -8 points in the other team's favor, right? Because it's, you just subbed your entire bench out. I took more pride in the scoring margin. And I would say that I speak for most coaches right now, that this final score of the game has never been more important towards your site, certainly, but I believe it has something to do with making the tournament and where you're seated. You just mentioned it about Providence. One of the things is all these close games, they're winning, and that's really what counts. But, they're winning by 1 point. Unfortunately, they had a couple lopsided losses in there, and you see what it did. It spirals them downward on your site. Gonzaga is a great example. You look at the scoring margin, especially in their own conference, like I think it helps them. So, I think a lot of people say that, hey, one thing that KenPom overvalues is beating a team you should beat by a huge margin versus 8 points or 10 points. Do you agree with that?
I would say it's a fair criticism in cases of, really good teams playing really bad teams. Certainly the point of the system, obviously is not for, it assumes like some sort of normal effort at the end of games. I would say like the idea that, more coaches are leaving their their guys in late in games to improve their scoring margin. I mean, that makes me uncomfortable, but also I would say,
hey, you've moved the needle.
yeah, I get it. I would also say though that like, I mean, you know players better than I do, but I still think if you're up 30 at the end of a game and your starters are in the game, like they're probably not playing with the same urgency that they do in the first half. You know, they're not going on floor, you know, diving on the floor after loose balls or whatever. And so some of that takes care of itself, but there's no doubt, like, yeah, like a late 10-0 run in garbage time probably shouldn't be included in the formula. Like I should be filtering that out. And maybe someday I will. There's an issue for me. Like I have this system that's been running for 20 years and like the formula has been mostly the same. And like, I kind of don't want to change it and have to go back and change all those years because people remember where they finished in those years. And now they're going to go back and look at it and be like, hey, I thought I was 34th that year. Now I'm 38th. Like what's going on, Ken?
Yeah.
Right.
So there's that holds it back. But I do agree. Like there's no doubt Gonzaga is probably rated 2 or 3 points too high in my system. Like they're still the best team in the country. I feel pretty confident in that. But yeah, the fact that, you know, they beat the 200th ranked team by 40 points when they're expected to beat them by 30 points, and that might improve them marginally in the system is, you know, maybe not the best feature in the system. I can own that.
Yeah. Arch, you got
I would just say this, you know, one of the things that's interesting to me is the NCAA tournament selection committee uses the net. You know, it's changed here in the last year or so. They haven't really given anyone a transparent formula for what the net accounts for. It's not the end all be all, you know, the determining factor. But I think one thing that really is unique, and probably from your standpoint, is analytics now plays a role, you know, in the net rankings, and, you know, scoring margin and efficiencies play a big role, regardless of how people want to do the eye tests or whatnot. But you have to feel pretty unique that right now the selection committee not only is valuing what you do, but it's a big part of what goes on in terms of measuring the net. And when you look at the net and you look at your ratings and whatnot, what could you give the average listener out there a piece to the puzzle when it comes to their net rating versus your ratings and like the selection process and seeding? But you do play a role in that right now with your role in college basketball.
Yeah. So the net, you know, as you pointed out, it's not transparent. That's, you know, I can understand a little bit why it's not transparent. You know, the NCAA doesn't want a bunch of knockoff websites posting the net rating, right? They want their own website and they want everybody to go there. So I get that. It's disappointing that they didn't like compute it for previous years, which they could easily do. You know, then we can get a better idea of kind of how it works. But it is, you know, it does seem like it's pretty similar to my system. Obviously, it's based on efficiency margin. I think the two main differences are there is some inclusion there in terms of like wins and losses, like somehow that factors in. And then,
but the fact that you have a preseason starting point and the net doesn't, that's one major difference.
That is a major difference. You know, by the end of the year, it's not a difference because the preseason starting point doesn't factor into my ratings at that point. So,
by the way, at what point in the season do you think that you can say in your best assessment that where a team started is irrelevant to now where they're at? Like, would you say February?
Yeah, early February. Basically, it's after a team plays 21 games. Okay. It's entirely gone. But, you know, when a team's played 20 games, like it's a very, very small factor, right? So, you know, the preseason ratings are, you know, something people get bent out of shape over as well. But it does come back to the point where I'm trying to make predictions. So, you know, you're not going to make good predictions 2 games into the season if you don't have a preseason rating. And for like 90% of the teams, you look back on those preseason ratings at the end of the year and they're like pretty close. So they, you know, they do a pretty good job of providing like reasonable ratings early in the season and a reasonable estimate of how teams are. And, you know, you can look at any number of teams that like start off kind of unexpectedly and then kind of rebound, you know, or in either direction. Dayton's that's a great example this year where they started off like they lost like 3 home games in a row, like 3 bye games in a row, you know. Right. And if you didn't have preseason ratings, you'd have had them rating like, you know, 250th or something. And they clearly, you know, you knew from their roster like they weren't the 250th best team at that point. So anyway, you got me on a little soapbox there about preseason ratings, but that's why I include them, is because they do help make better predictions early in the season.
So I think this is the most important question I can ask you. My team is now in the NCAA tournament. And, the one thing about the tournament that makes it magical is it's a one-shot deal, right? 40 minutes,
Yeah.
neutral court, single elimination. If it was a 7-game series, your website probably wouldn't be as, like to me, popular almost. It's like the fact that it's just like a one-time deal. What style component do you think makes the best teams the most vulnerable in this neutral court single elimination March Madness time? When you look at skepticism, yeah, they've had a great year. They're ranked high, even in your on your website, but you worry about them potentially getting eliminated in the tournament. Is there a stat or stats that come to your mind that makes you worry about that very, very good team?
Well, first, I would say that college basketball is awesome because teams can be great playing a variety of styles. And so it's hard. Like if a team has a track record over the course of a year and they're, ranked very high in my ratings, like it's hard to rule them out based on style. They're still a very good team. And however they got there, if they've done that consistently for 30 games, the chances are they're going to be a really tough out in the NCAA tournament. But if we had to point to something, I'd say there's a couple things. One is, what we see increasingly, I think even maybe more so this year, is that great offense beats great defense. So you can look at teams that are built on great defense and maybe have a mediocre offense, and they're probably more in danger of getting upset than the flip. A team that has a great offense and a mediocre defense, like hot shooting can sustain you for a while, and if you have good shooters, you have a better chance of hot shooting. And you can, look at Virginia historically, like they had that Tony Bennett's obviously had a long run, 10-year run of having outstanding defense, top 5 defense almost every year. And the offense a lot of times is mediocre, but the year they won the national title, the offense was actually, I think, 2 in the country or something.
No, you're right.
The defense was 5. So
yeah,
gives you an indication of that. I think the other thing is like good. You mentioned breaking it down between 2-point shooting and 3-point shooting, and 2-point shooting is just more consistent and more stable from game to game than 3-point shooting on both sides of the court. So if you have great 2-point shooting defense, chances are that's going to hold up in the long run. If you have great 2-point shooting offense, chances are that's going to hold up in the long run. 3-point shooting,
teams that have both, and those teams that have both, those are the ones that to me are going to be the toughest out. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole thing, is like having balance. People want like little cliches like, defense wins championships or whatever, but you know what wins championships? Great offense and great defense. And it really starts with that 2-point percentage. If you don't have, it's tough to win with mediocre 2-point percentage offense or defense. It has been done, but it is rare, and I would not count on it.
Yeah.
I would look at it like this, Ken. I think Final Four good. Would you say has to be top 10 OND, or is it more top 10, top 20? Or do you just, because there's probably, I'd say 8 teams in that ballpark today that are a top 10 O and a top 20 D. If you just double it and make it 16, you're probably in that range of top 20 in both. But in your estimation, as I look at it, Final Four good, winning 4 in a row to get to the Final Four. Traditionally, is there a marker that you would say this team's got a great chance, this team's going to struggle, et cetera? What's your border? What's your median line when it comes to how good you have to be to get there?
So getting to the Final Four is a little bit of a lower bar. Like we've had teams get to the Final Four outside the top 100 in one of those categories. It doesn't, there's a little bit more flukiness getting to the Final Four. So I try to avoid setting like hard boundaries. I know people want, these little facts that they can use to fill out their bracket and things like that. Certainly top 10 O&D is like championship material. Like you're probably not finding the national championship outside of that category. That said, like I think Baylor was like, special case last year for sure, but Baylor was like 40th in defense heading into the tournament last year. And I mean, you're going to be like, no way were they the 40th best defense. But, they had that COVID pause, and they actually legitimately were not playing good defense there for a stretch in February last year. Clearly their peak was best defense in the country, but their track record last year was not that great heading into the tournament. So you have those issues. You have to kind of use your noggin, but I'd say like top 10 is championship material, and top, 25 on both sides is Final Four material. But that said, you can always get a VCU in 2011 or whatever, or
Right.
Oregon State last year, who was like a game away.
Like I look at a team like Purdue right now, and Purdue is
yeah.
historically good on offense right now, number 1 overall in the metrics, 3 on 3 in America in 3-point field goal percentage offense. They're 7th in 2-point field goal percentage
That's
offense.
a heck of a combination.
So that offense is like, but they're 106, and this is Matt's worst defensive team since 2013 in terms of the ratings. I'm not saying they're a bad defensive team. It's just 106 is low for Purdue. It's the lowest since 2013. And I look at them in 2-point field goal percentage defense is 132, in 3-point field goal percentage defense is 181, and they're 341 in forced turnovers. Part of it's probably a byproduct of their personnel, but their offense is overwhelming to the point where I think they got a chance to win the Big Ten and probably get a 1 seed by the end of the year, and they're heading in that way. But I look at their defense and I say, man, is 106 going to be good enough, on a 1-game deal in a neutral setting? Is their defense going to be good enough to overcome? And I think like Purdue, to me, they could probably take another jump defensively, but that's a drastic difference. Number 1-0 and 106 for a 1 seed, trying to get to the Final Four.
It's definitely concerning. I guess the way I would just describe it is like, they cannot in the tournament, if they play like the 106 defense, no chance. They're going to get beat early, beat before the Final Four anyway. They would have to, play like a top 40D in the tournament. Like, I think this came up maybe with Duke in 2015. I think they were like 80th, 90th defense heading into the tournament, or maybe not heading into the tournament, but maybe heading into the ACC tournament or something. And then, their guys figured it out, and they clearly had the personnel where you're like, upside is they can play good defense if they ever figure it out. And they did figure it out, and they figured it out in the tournament, and obviously they won it. And so that's how I would put it. Like, you cannot play like the 106th best defense,
right?
Get to the Final Four. You have to improve.
The reason I bring them up is because of the elite teams in college basketball, which they are. They have a very unique metric. It's not like 10 and 14 like Auburn, or 12 and 5 like Arizona, 2 and 10, 1 and 106. That's a big difference. And if you look at some of those teams that are kind of like in that regard, LSU is the opposite. LSU is like 117 on O, 1 on D. You know what I mean? I think.
But one
you
thing
said
I
early though, good offense beats good defense.
That's
I think
right.
that's where you look at LSU struggling right now and saying their defense damn near has to be perfect to win a game.
Yeah, but I thought the point you made, Ken, about historically the better offense beats the better defense in the tournament. It's a powerful statement. I mean, that says a lot. One thing you and I have talked about in the past is, and this goes back, the game's changed somewhat. I mean, actually, it's changed quite a bit in the last 6 or 7 years. But we had a couple of those teams at Arizona were really good on defense, good on offense too. Stanley Johnson and TJ McConnell, Aaron Gordon, that 2-year run. We lost to Wisconsin in the Elite Eight. But I was concerned about, what metric do you look at the most? Do I keep my eye on as a coach that we're not that we can make ourselves the least vulnerable in early rounds in the tournament as a high seed? And what you said to me at the time, and I'd be curious to bring it back up, is look at 3-point defense. Not from a percentage. Percentage is, you want to be good against 3-point shot, 3-point percentage defense. But the teams that can be vulnerable in early rounds that are high seeds are teams that the other team shoots a lot of threes against them. So that, if you, I think you said it like this, if you constantly are letting teams shoot 25, 30 threes, you could run in a 40-minute game against a hot shooting team or a great 3-point shooting team and leave early because of that stat alone. You let too many threes go up. And when you told me that, I thought of Duke's great run that they had under Coach K. That's one of the things historically, especially when he in his earlier teams, you couldn't get a 3-point shot up, let alone them make it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he was, and it's kind of odd because like late in his career, he's kind of gotten away from that, but like,
Right.
in a era where there's more 3-pointers being shot, he's gotten away from it. So yeah, it's kind of odd. He was really the first to jump on that. And, they obviously picked you up at half court and, denied passing lanes and things like that. But yeah, that was kind of a byproduct of his defense, was like, you weren't getting 3-pointers against him. And it's very true. Like college basketball game, it really, the thing that is most predictable about a game is where shots are going to come from. There's obviously a lot of things that aren't predictable, but if I just look at a shooting profile from a team, how they give up shots at the rim, how they defend the three, and how, the opposing offense takes those shots, like, I have a really good idea of how that's going to work out in the game. Teams that don't take many threes and play against a defense that takes that away, obviously they're not going to take many threes in that game. If they can't get to the rim, they're not going to get to the rim if they're playing a defense that defends the rim really well. So a game is really about how, what kind of shots you get. And then the reason that, you have upsets and unexpected things happen is because, field goal percentage is highly variable, and sometimes shots drop and sometimes they don't. But yeah, I think it's really important to understand, watching a game or coaching a game or whatever, like, controlling where shots come from is really what a defense can do. And, it starts with the 3-point shot. And I don't know if you're like leading into LSU here, but they're a particularly unusual defense this year, where they're, at least still hanging on to being the best defense in the country. And yet they give up a ton of threes.
Yeah,
that's like
crazy.
A completely new wrinkle. Will Wade has not had good defensive teams there. And then this year, they have so much length at the
they do a lot
perimeter.
of
Yeah, that they, teams can take threes and they can still be like, the theory behind this is that teams, once you take a three, like, the shot's up and you can't really defend it then, it's going to go in or it's not going to go in. But LSU is probably a rare case where they can actually, like, the shot player rises for a shot and they can still recover and defend and bother that shot pretty well. And so far they've gotten away with it. Obviously they're going through a rough patch, but I don't think that rough patch has been due to like hot 3-point shooting. I think it's just other things going on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
listen, Ken, I appreciate your time. This is always enlightening. I would just say my perspective, former coach, someone who's followed you so religiously for the last 20 years, when you start looking at teams who's making the tournament, advancing, your site is the absolute best. And I think I speak for all coaches. You have no idea the impact you've made in allowing a coach to see his own team, weaknesses, strengths, what they need to improve on, individual players, the same thing as Arch pointed out, and also the other team you're getting ready to play. And I think that other part of your site, where once you get into February and you can click on the conference only, where there's no non-conference schedule, like how do you truly do against each other? I think that's equally helpful to really know like where you stack up and what are the things you need to do well on. So, but really appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks guys. Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. Appreciate all the support you guys have given me, and enjoy the conversation. Keep up the good work the rest of the year. I really enjoy the insight that you bring to the game. So it's been really fun to watch you guys.
Appreciate
Ken, thanks, man. Thanks.
And again, remember, Arch, the #1 free throw defensive coach in the history, not the history, I think over the last decade in college basketball. So I don't know if there's an award or anything you need to give him, but I think it's surreal to see both of you on the same screen.
It's been an honor, really. And
you're probably the only person in the whole entire world that could tell somebody that number.
Oh, all right, Ken, we'll see
We'll see you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Sean, Ken Pomeroy, I tell you what, he's made a lot of people over the last probably 5 or 6 years here who can't catch a ball, dribble a ball, or pass a ball. He can sure help you look like you know what you're talking about right now in terms of the game. There's so many people that cover the game now that reference him. And I tell you, as a coach, though, it is without a doubt, the first thing you do in the morning when you wake up is you look at that site and you kind of see where you're at, who you play. And it's an incredible platform that he's given everybody to kind of study.
Arch, I thought the two things that really stand out for me with our conversation with him is and again, he wasn't just giving you his opinion, he was basing it on his site and the history of his site. Really good offense trumps good defense in the
Yeah.
NCAA tournament. It's a harder out when you're elite offensively.
Yeah.
And I think if you have both, then obviously that speaks for itself. And I think the second thing he said, look at a team's ability to score 2-point percentage, the percentage that they score from two, the amount of twos they score, that they take each game, and how they defend the two. That quality also makes for a tough out. And one of the teams that I think of, just because I watch him closely when he said those things, is Arizona. Where they're thriving to this point is that they're not only good in 2-point offense, but they're equally great in 2-point defense as well. And there's also other teams that you could put in that category.
Gonzaga.
But it's interesting to hear him say
I
that.
agree with, I mean, I agree with him. I know how you feel when you're in the tournament. Everybody has something that they're very good at, but I tell you, when it comes down to winning the game, who can score in the half court, who can execute, score, get easy shots, because the game is so hard in the tournament. It's such a different style at times, but it's unique. I mean, it's unique to look at the teams where he has rated, and then sometimes where they're projected going into the tournament. Like, for instance, Murray State, they're 22-2. And they're ranked in the top 25 this week, but Murray State's 27th in KenPom today.
Mhm.
And if they don't win their conference tournament, are they going to get in? That's that old deal of 25, 26, 27 wins. But right now, if you're 27 in KenPom, you're ahead of Arkansas, San Francisco, Iowa State, Wisconsin, Boise State, Washington State, Indiana, Wyoming, Seton Hall. Like, 27 on February 10th is 27. You know what I mean? And like, be interested to see if Murray wins this thing out and how they do, but they're an at-large team, in my opinion. And be interested to see kind of where they go if they don't win the conference tournament. How does that all work for a team like that?
Arch, I want to, fast forward to point guard vision. And before I do that, I want to just give you this number, because one of the teams that people talk a lot about is Loyola Chicago from the Missouri Valley.
Yep.
That what happens if they don't win the Missouri Valley Conference tournament? Would they be an at-large team? And, I looked at them earlier. I don't see any way that you can keep them out of the tournament. And one of the big stats that helps them is they control their non-conference schedule. And this year they played the 50th toughest non-conference schedule in the country. To some people that number may not mean much, but if you play the 50th toughest non-conference schedule, you played a really good non-conference schedule. You played a schedule that you wanted to help get you an at-large berth. And I think that when you look at their quad 1 and quad 2 wins, they're 4-4 at the moment here in early February. They have more quad 1 and quad 2 wins than quite a few other teams that feel like they're trying to make the same tournament as Loyola. I really believe in Loyola. Like, they're 41 on offense, they're 41 on defense in KenPom. They played the 50th toughest non-conference schedule, and they're an at-large team. At-large, what, 1 of 35? There's 35 at-larges given out. Maybe I'm off by a couple. They're one of the top 35 teams in the country now, and I think they'll be the same here in a month from now. But along those lines, point guard vision, and just a quick recap, Arch, to give us a little credibility. Started with St. Bonaventure, and they're having a good season. Maybe not as good as we had thought originally, but would you agree with that?
Yeah, Bonnies have got off to a great start in November. I think in early December, COVID plus maybe an injury or two maybe derailed them, from doing the running the table, being, clear cut favorite in the A-10. They stumbled a few times, but I still think at the end of the day, St. Bonaventure is on pace to win 20 games plus. They'll be right there in the discussion at the end of the year for A10 regular season. If they're not going to be there, they'll be in the A10 tournament, but they're going to have a great year. They're 12-7, they're 4-4 in the A10, and they still have a ton of games remaining. But I think they got derailed a little bit. Injuries in November, December, maybe a COVID pause or two. They stumbled a little bit here of late in conference play, but they're still a team I think that's going to have a finish with another great season, regular season.
Colorado State, obviously, they're playing really well, which was one of our teams that we selected.
Yep.
St. Mary's, ditto for St. Mary's.
Great
Their
year.
offense has steadily climbed. They've always been elite defensively, but their offense over the last month has improved. They're making shots. They seem to have more of a flow to what they're doing, more of a confidence. They have more different players stepping up on offense to complement an already just terrific defensive team. So you have Colorado State, you have St. Mary's, you have St. Bonaventure.
Davidson is the other team that we went over who's having a great year. They're
Right.
a clear-cut favorite to win the regular season. They're an at-large bid team this season, and they have a chance to win 25 plus games this year, and they have an offense.
They would be a team that I would not want to see
in
the
offense.
NCAA tournament.
If you're talking about good offense beats good defense, they're a team that can win games in the tournament because of how good they are on offense.
Yeah. So today I'll bring up Wyoming. Jeff Linder is their coach. He does an outstanding job. I've been familiar with Jeff. You remember Arch when he was an assistant at Boise State for Leon Rice, and we both played against Boise State. They had a unique way of playing offense. They utilized their personnel maybe as well as any college team when he was on that staff. He had a lot to do with their offense. He left there to be the head coach at Northern Colorado. Historically, not a place where they've always been in the winner's circle. And he did it both with his defense and his offense at Northern Colorado. At one point, I think he was top 5 in America in defending the 3-point shot, maybe number 1 in America for a period of time when he coached in Northern Colorado in the Big Sky. And then he's only in his second year at Wyoming, first year being under COVID, which is hard on all of us. But I think when you look at his team right now, they're 20-2. Is that right at the moment?
Currently, right now, they're 19-3, but
19-3.
they're in sole first place of the Mountain West at 8-1, and they just beat Colorado State, Boise State, and then won at Fresno this weekend for a really, really big 3-game swing that they had. That they're in the driver's seat to win the Mountain West regular season right now. And
when you watch them on TV in Wyoming, place is packed, the arena is packed. They have an energy surrounding this team, and he's just doing an outstanding job. Again, 19-3. I know one of his 3 losses is at Arizona. And you think
at Arizona, neutral to Stanford, and then at Boise, where there are 3 losses this year. But they've had road wins at Washington. In league play, they've already won against Boise, against Colorado State, won at Fresno. They still have to play San Diego State, I think, but they've done an unbelievable job. And Hunter Maldonado is probably
he's
a very unknown player in college basketball. He's a 6'6 plus guard who they use at the point or off the ball. And he's got that perimeter to post back down game going down. And he's as difficult to guard as any player that you'll play against in college. A lot like the Villanova teams when their guards back down, but he has the capability to do that almost for 40 minutes. And he's an unbelievable player, along with Graham Ike, their big guy, who's a terrific player as well. But they're very good. And right now, the Mountain West Conference between San Diego State, Colorado State, Boise, and now Wyoming, it's a 4-bid league this year. It's just
to give them a lot of credit. League. And when you watch their games, there's so many of those arenas that have great crowds and some really good coaches in that league. We talk about Nico Medved at Colorado State earlier, but Jeff Linder he deserves all the credit in the world, doing an outstanding job at Wyoming in only his second year. And they have a good team. That's for sure.
Really, really good team. Yeah.
Well, Arch, Go ahead, take it
Yeah.
away.
That's it for us this week. Real quick, I was glad to be able to bring KenPom on and get that out there, and then talk a little bit here about Wyoming. It's coming down the home stretch, about 3.5 weeks left of the regular season. This is when the games really get good, and we're looking forward to another good week here as the season progresses. But things are shaping up pretty good in these leagues, and some great basketball that we'll be able to talk about here coming down the stretch next couple of weeks. But for Sean and Arch on the Next Play podcast, we'll talk to you guys soon.